No xadrez, a peça de menor valor é o peão. O peão só pode andar uma casa por vez e numa única direção, para frente. Mas em determinadas circunstâncias, o peão pode se tornar a peça mais poderosa do tabuleiro de xadrez. Quando o peão chega à última casa, ele pode se transformar em qualquer outra peça mais poderosa: cavalo, bispo, torre, até rainha. O peão só não pode se transformar em uma peça: o rei. Mesmo que você não entenda nada de xadrez, vai se interessar pela história de um peão que ousou se transformar em rei. Seu nome é Garry Kasparov. A história desse homem começou a ser traçada antes de seu nascimento. Filho de pai judeu e mãe armênia, nascido no Azerbaijão. A vida de Garry Kasparov resume a mistura de etnias que formou a antiga União Soviética. E não fosse a União Soviética, Garry nunca teria se tornado Kasparov.
In general, chess was very well received. There were cultural traditions, but also there was a lot of support from the state, because chess was seen by the communist officials as the ideological weapon to prove the intellectual superiority of communist regime over decadent West. So that's why in chess, if you had a talent in chess, I mean, you would have great opportunity to develop it.
Lenin, o líder da Revolução Comunista de 1917, era um entusiasta do xadrez. O Partido Comunista investiu pesado no jogo para os trabalhadores. Nos campos e nas fábricas, todos podiam jogar xadrez. Por isso, não surpreende que o título mundial de xadrez tenha se tornado um monopólio soviético. Assim como no jogo das bonecas russas, conhecidas como matrioshkas, um grande mestre sucedia o outro. O primeiro campeão mundial soviético foi Mikhail Botvinnik, da Rússia, em 1948. Depois veio outro russo, Vassily Smyslov, Mikhail Tal, da Letônia, Tigran Petrosyan, da Armênia, Boris Spassky, da Rússia. A hegemonia soviética só foi quebrada em 1972 por um gênio vindo dos Estados Unidos, Bobby Fischer. A vitória de um americano, em plena Guerra Fria, foi um golpe para o Partido Comunista. Para destronar Bobby Fischer, em 1975, a União Soviética apostou todas as fichas em seu mais talentoso jovem, Anatoly Karpov. Mas Karpov nem precisou desafiar Fischer. Já sofrendo dos problemas psicológicos que o atormentaram até o fim da vida, Fischer recusou-se a enfrentar Karpov. Assim, o campeão voltava a ser um grande mestre soviético. Tudo indicava que o domínio comunista tinha voltado para ficar, mas a matrioshka que ia suceder Karpov não era exatamente do agrado do partido.
Almost instantly. I learned to play chess somewhere in 69, and in 70 I was sent to a chess group at Pioneer Palace in Baku, and nobody had doubts. Nobody around me had doubts that chess, I mean, I had a unique chess talent, which didn't mean that I would be the world champion or a top player, but there were all conditions in place for me to develop this talent.
Nessa lista de grandes duelos, o xadrez tem um lugar de honra. Karpov versus Kasparov. Os dois eram antagonistas em tudo, a começar pela política.
I think it's already when I was 17, 18, it was very, very clear that the Soviet system would not like another challenge to Karpov, a real challenge to Karpov. Not that I was a total stranger for the system. Also, you know, I was half Armenian, half Jewish. Karpov was ethnic Russian. But I think more important was that Karpov was a loyal soldier of the party. And they sensed that I was not positively affected by the communist ideas. So I was free-minded, and I believed in this, in things that were quite contradictory. So I already sensed resistance on different levels to prevent my further progress.
Some players defected, like Korchnoi. They went to the West. Why didn't you do so?
Carson defected when he was in his mid-40s. Now, I never had even the idea because I had my family, my mother was there, and when I say family, it's extended family. It's more like, you know, the Southern or Oriental, when you had my mother's sisters and their kids, my cousins, so it's like a big family, and it was my, you know, my country, this environment where I felt most comfortable. Even now, you know, just look at the last 10, 15 years, I could even decide to live elsewhere, and that might be more profitable for me, not to be engaged in this political fight against the new dictatorship in Russia. But still, it's very difficult to cut your roots. So for me, it was never an option.
Entre 1984 e 1990, Garry Kasparov e Anatoly Karpov disputaram 5 vezes o título mundial. Ao todo, foram 144 partidas. Para se ter uma ideia do equilíbrio entre os dois, foram 21 vitórias de Kasparov, 19 de Karpov e nada menos que 104 empates. Impossível falar de Kasparov sem Karpov, e vice-versa.
In the 80s, I think it was very simple because we represented a very different set of values. Karpov, one or another, was part of this old Soviet system. But the fact is, he wasn't. He still is a great chess player. So it's not like the faceless bureaucrat. But he was very much defended by the system. He was engraved in the system. And I was fighting the system. I believe the system was wrong. The system was deadly and destructive. Also, we had style differences, so it created the perfect field for rivalry. I was proud, still proud, that I won. We played his 5 matches and I ended up as a winner. But today, we have nothing to share. So we still are quite far apart on the political views. So Karpov is indifferent or even friendly to what's happening in Russia, while I'm fighting it fiercely. But when it comes to chess, we both recognize that it's for the world champions to get together and to influence the change, because the game is in really bad shape. And here we don't have any differences. So Karpov and myself were looking at the chess problems from the same angle.
Mesmo boicotado pelo sistema, Kasparov conseguiu desafiar Karpov pelo título mundial em 1984. O jovem desafiante tinha apenas 21 anos. A disputa foi marcada no coração do sistema, a Praça Vermelha, em Moscou. O primeiro que vencesse 6 partidas seria o campeão. Karpov começou melhor, abriu 5-0. À beira do abismo, Kasparov reagiu. Depois de 14 empates seguidos, o desafiante começou a vencer uma atrás da outra. Reduziu o placar para 5-3. Nesse instante, os cartolas do xadrez decidiram suspender a disputa.
When I played Karpov, we were different, like fire and ice. So, but it was very important who could actually dominate the agenda. Same in business. You can look at the history of military history, the battlegrounds. If you had, let's say, medieval battleground, you have cavalry. You want to fight on the valley. If you're fighting against cavalry, you're looking for the hills. So it's very important to actually identify the environment, the landscape, all the elements of this that will be crucial for your decision making before you say, I'll have to do this. And that's why simply giving an advice to a group of people to do something specific is wrong, because some of them are very good in micromanagement, some of them are very good in the big picture. So, and if you give them the same advice, it could be very useful for one and poisonous for others.
Novo duelo Karpov-Kasparov foi marcado para 1985. Desta vez, Kasparov estava preparado, venceu por 5-3 e tornou-se, aos 22 anos, o mais jovem campeão da história. Nesse dia, além de uma coroa de louros, ele recebeu estranho conselho.
I'm sorry for you, because the happiest day of your life has just passed. I was quite shocked when I heard it. I was just 22, and I was just on the sort of on my peak. It was the greatest moment. So it's like you conquer the earth, sky's the limit, and suddenly, you hear this very profound philosophical warning. I think later, I thought that was a very good advice, if you may call it advice, because on one side, she could be right. On the other side, she was giving me sort of new motivation to prove her wrong. For me, it was always search for perfection. I looked for the best moves. I wanted to expand the horizons of the game. I was looking for new ideas. So I need to, I never had any problems, motivational problems to search for self-improvement. So that's why for me, consuming information and coming up with new ideas was like a natural algorithm. Yeah, and I had many challenges, after I beat Karpov and I became the world champion, I had to face other younger players, and then even younger players. So it was and then there were computers, and I always had to update sort of my decision-making mechanism.